Today we are joined with Grace Griffin for the new Millennial on Down series I'm doing to help people like me navigate their careers, finance, and global upheaval. In this episode, we discuss how Grace went from working at Pizza Hut to working in clinical research, owning a house, and navigating mental health. This is the episode for anyone stuck in a job they don't love, want to learn the strategies to navigate a career, or are hungry to learn about another person who passionately just wants to make a change in the world. Also, check out her podcast, Read It and Screech. Let's stay curious, learn about Grace, a Pizza Hut tyrant, ADHD diagnosis, and more on this episode of Learning With Lowell. Well, now you work in research, you have a degree, you have all these different things. You had very humble beginnings as someone who worked at Pizza Hut. And as someone who has never worked at Pizza Hut, but consumed Pizza Hut, I'm sure there's lots of stuff there that I don't want to know about, but I want to know about it today. So starting there, what was life at Pizza Hut? What did you do? And what was that like?
I thought it was really fun. So I met some interesting people, some people that I'm still like friends with on Facebook now. I'm always really proud of all of us who have kind of made our way. um, so I was a waitress. So we did like just kind of regular wait staff activities, and then we would also have to kind of help back in the kitchen here and there. And there's not as many like sit down Pizza Hut restaurants now that were older. But at the time, like it was just like any other restaurant. I had a lot of fun. The tips were terrible because like it's pizza and people kind of don't even associate that you're supposed to tip sometimes like a waitress in that environment, even though it's a sit down restaurant just like everything else. Some people would be really rude. But I just thought it was a lot of fun. I'm a very social person. And so waiting tables is like that constant release of like dopamine from interacting with people. And so I did have a lot of fun with it. Something interesting was that my boss, she was one of the nastiest people I've ever worked for. Considering we're at Pizza Hut, I feel like we're all on the same level. Like we can all just be aware of where we are right now. And you would think that she was like running the kitchen at the White House. She was so strict and so awful and such a bitch. And she was so nasty that she put like we would have to make like a certain amount of money, and then if you didn't declare enough money on your tips, the restaurant is supposed to compensate you so that you make at least minimum wage. So you're not rolling in it. They're only giving you like maybe $10 that day of whatever you didn't make. And so at one point we had to work through a hurricane. And so I remember like having to run and slosh through the rain to just get in the door. And then we of course had tons and tons of delivery orders, but nobody came in to eat because who's gonna go out in that? So we had like one or two tables for the whole shift, for like 2 days straight. So for both of those days, they were supposed to compensate us for that money because we were there and we were working. So they were supposed to give us our $7 an hour, you know. And she printed off people's tip declarations and she posted it next to the time clock. And she put on there, if you can't make at least minimum wage, I'll just find someone else who will. Even though we only had two tables. So like, unless you're gonna beat those people for the extra $14 or whatever, nothing was gonna happen. And somebody called the labor board on her and we all got like $1,500 cash or a check for 1,500
Fantastic, yeah.
bucks from Pizza Hut because of how illegal that was what she did.
At any point in this conversation, if you find value in it, please subscribe. It is hugely beneficial, and it tells Google and everyone out there that this is content worth watching. Thank you for everyone thus far who has commented, liked, subscribed, and told their friends. It
Well, that's
sounds
where it
terrible.
started. Oh, she was awful. And I tried really hard I just like really believe so strongly that like you should be nice to people and that people are like kind under all of their, terrible exterior. But she was just awful. And I actually saw her not that long ago. It's been 10 years and I saw her working at a different restaurant and she was still being a bitch to the other people there.
Yeah, I was
So,
I recently was at Qdoba or Subway or something like that, and the lady, she was like a little I think it was a high schooler. She's just a young little kid, and or young lady. I don't know if one's like condescending, but like just a little like a young person, and she was shaking as she was taking people's orders, and I was like, "What's going on?" Like, because you can tell when someone's scared and there's
yeah.
something going on, and I was like, hey, take your time. I'm not in a rush. I'm not gonna
Mhm.
if someone just got done yelling at you, you just take your time. Like, get a drink of water. I'm cool. Like, we're cool here. Let's like
Mhm.
de-escalate.
Mhm.
And she started relaxing and like, oh, thank you. Like, it's been one
Mhm.
of those days. And the manager comes out, and as soon as the manager starts coming out, she starts shaking again, and because like the woman just starts like verbally like whipping her, and it's just like, what the fuck are you doing? She's doing this bad. Like, she's saying like, go faster, go faster, go faster. We
Mhm.
have such a big liner, and all these different things that she's doing wrong. It's like, she's a young lady. Okay,
Mhm.
if you want her to go faster, how about you go over here and help her out? Because she can't. She only go at a certain speed. If she's doing something that
Mhm.
she could be doing better, now's not the time to ride her on it.
Mhm.
Like, go help her
Mhm.
later. Like, hey, here's a better
Right.
technique or something, right?
Right.
And so my wife and I made it our mission to contact corporate and complain
Did you
about the
really?
manager. Yeah, and they got fired. We even heard back from corporate saying that person was fired because multiple people were saying it was inappropriate, and I think
Mhm.
also probably the employees. I like that about modern employees. It's like if you treat them wrong, it does seem like they'll complain. They'll say something, which is really nice.
Mhm.
Because no one should be treated that way. Life's too short, and like just imagine like going in your whole day shaking because you're so scared
Mhm.
because
Over a
maybe it,
burrito.
yeah, or a burrito or a Subway or something like that. It was
Yeah.
terrible, but
Yeah.
um,
Ugh.
I went in there recently, and the manager wasn't there, and everyone was happy, and they were like laughing and stuff. It's like,
Mhm.
what a change. I didn't see the lady in
Mhm.
there, but I
Mhm.
like to think she had a better life, or at least she's
Oh
in a better
yeah.
place now.
No, like
Yeah,
if you're getting up and you're getting dressed and you're going to make sandwiches, you deserve to do so without being abused.
yeah,
All of us
yeah.
do, but I'm just like, what about that? Like, what about like a retail level job or a food service industry job? It's like, here's the abuse line, you've fallen under it. That's not how that works whatsoever.
Yeah, I think sometimes I wonder, like, because I've had that stuff happen to me when I was working for other people. Um, it's usually when you're younger too, but then
Mm-hmm.
if you're in certain positions, why are you doing this? Who did this to you? Who hurt you? Like, I think it's all the time, like,
I know.
who hurt you?
I know.
Because
I know.
they
I'm
were
like, what?
taught that that was appropriate, you know?
And to be perfectly honest, like sometimes, it's frustrating for whatever reason to be somewhere and like the wait time's extra long or whatever. But typically, I'm just like, I just won't come back. I'm
Yeah.
not gonna like fuss at somebody unless there's like just an egregious, like, you didn't do your job and my life is now extremely complicated because of the one job you were supposed to do. But even then, I'm not going to be nasty. I'm just going to like choose a different location next time.
Well, you're a nice person. I don't know if you've heard about this, but the rates of people being just crazy on planes has gone through the roof since COVID. Like the more people being fined, people are like biting flight attendants, like attacking. It's wild. Ever since COVID, like it's been nuts. But I think the crouton of a colonel there for people who are younger and have a boss who's treating them this way is I've never experienced a boss treat someone this way who wasn't doing something illegal. So I think that you
True
know
story.
you don't know what it is, but I bet if you contacted the labor board, which here's the thing, if you contact the labor board and they come for you, if they like react to you in that for doing that, that's whistleblowing. You're protected for
Uh-huh.
that. You will
Yeah, and you
get
get paid.
yes. So I think that the
Uh-huh.
kernel here is it's great that you guys stood up for yourselves, said that hey that's not appropriate. Someone
Mhm.
contacted the labor board, maybe all of you guys together or whatever, and because of that you got your money that you deserve that you earned. The idea that
Mhm.
you have to like fight for minimum wage when you were gainfully employed is stupid to me. Um,
Mhm.
were there any other lovely life lessons like that that you learned from Pizza Hut?
Well, there was one that stuck with me. Well, there was two. There was this lady who came. She was like half drunk, and she was with her husband or boyfriend, I don't know. And she was like, "I just got done fighting a DUI. Lesson not learned." And she said, "Did you know that if you eat a paper towel, your breathalyzer test will come back clear?" I didn't know that, but I've held on to it just in case. I don't drink, but I've held on to it. It's been a life lesson from Pizza Hut. And then another time, a man came in, and I guess I just like came off well spoken at the time, and he said, "You should go to college and do something better with your life." And I was like, "Who's gonna serve you pizza then?"
Mhm.
Like I was just don't let people shit on you for whatever you're choosing to do. Like, who's gonna serve you your pizza? Who's gonna give you and your kid who you've got on the weekends their $5 personal pan if I'm not here? Why are you gonna shit on me for
Mhm.
or tell me I should do something better with my life? I was like, if I want to do this and it makes me happy, it gives me fulfillment, I'm gonna serve you pizza. And I thought about doing that forever despite him. because just like whatever you're choosing to do, if it makes you happy, if you wake up and you don't hate yourself and you don't hate your life, and you're able to put food in your mouth and your head on a pillow, then who don't let nasty old people like that make you feel bad for it.
Yeah, I think that like some really good advice I've heard on this is why let people who are not going to have to live through the decisions that they're suggesting you do overly guide your life. You know, like if I say, "Hey, you should go left," but like fundamentally you're like, "I think left's kind of a bad deal. I'm gonna go right,"
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, I'm not gonna be around to suffer through you going left into being a terrible idea. You know, like
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day,
Mm-hmm.
like you like having the agency to say like, no, I think I'm gonna do this or whatever. Additionally, I'm not gonna like be specific in what I'm about to say in terms of like your location, but like uh, you talked about how it's very busy sometimes, and maybe to really spite the guy, you could have like a traveling pizzeria that you do on the weekends, and you know, you could keep serving people pizza, and I don't know if you remember the guy's name, but you call it like Nate's Pizza Shack
I
or
wish
Don't Ever Tell Me What to Do Shack.
I wish I had jotted it down for that reason
Mhm.
specifically. But it's just like a weird time, or maybe just like a weird demographic of people who just feel like they have the agency to make determinations on about your life and where it's going. And like, who can, people have to work at Pizza Hut. They deserve respect. They deserve to be able to afford to pay their bills. And I don't know. That's obviously I could still like remember him and how he said that. And at the time I was in college, but I was like, it doesn't matter. Maybe I'm not in college. Maybe I love serving pizza. Maybe it's a fun job and that's what gives me the dopamine to get through till tomorrow. Why would you say that? And so like that's what I thought from that was that like I don't care
Mhm.
what my job is if I'm happy with it.
Yeah, and nowadays, like you can be like if you're like the best at something, there's usually like some type of league. I'm surprised by how many leagues exist. There's like there's a national barista competition, and not to
Mm-hmm.
put down baristas at all, but I was like, there's a competition where they will like fly you out, and you have to make like the perfect cup of coffee while you give like a history lesson or something or a speech. It's like wow,
Mm-hmm.
there's so much going on. But I think you get
Mm-hmm.
like money and all these other things. So like if you really love the thing you're doing, if you want to be a shoemaker or whatever it is, like
Mm-hmm.
there's usually there's an organization out there that's designed to appreciate you. And if it doesn't exist, maybe you make it yourself. Like the Pizza Pan
Absolutely.
Appreciation Brigade or something.
Absolutely. I was talking about doing that for podcasts because I know there's like different streaming awards and stuff, but I was like, it's my dream to make a podcast award show called The Potties. And I'm just gonna do that so I can give myself an award because if it's not
Mhm.
there for you, you should make it yourself.
Yeah.
100%, I
So
agree.
was Pizza Hut your first job, or was it just like the first job out of high school?
That was not my first job. My first job was a cashier at a grocery store, like my first real job. No, gosh, goes back before that. I just always worked like little jobs because we were poor. And so I had like little jobs. The first one I had that was like a W-2 was at a grocery store. I worked there for a year. I'm still friends with a lot of the people that I worked with there. It's called like we call it a rite of passage around here because it's like a local grocery store. They're everywhere, and everybody I know had to work there. And so then after that was Pizza Hut, and then that was like when I was in my like freshman year of college. That's where I was at Pizza Hut.
And so it's like you stayed there for 1 year essentially, and then you did something else, or how
Basically,
were you, okay? What was the when did you decide to leave? Was there like something? Was it the lack of pay or
I was so happy to leave because of that lady was.
mm,
I mean, I've had bosses that weren't my favorite, but I've rarely had one that made me want to quit.
mm,
Because usually you just like, you're not working with them all the time. You don't work hand in hand with your boss all the time. You can kind of work around it. But she was so bad. I was so glad to not work for her anymore. But I started CNA school to be a nurse aide because I wanted to go to nursing school. And so once I did that and I did like a work study to get through that period of time. And then I was able to work. I did that when I was started that when I was 18, that process. And so I worked at Pizza Hut for that time. And then as soon as I started the class in the work study, I stopped Pizza Hut and I started that. And then once I had my CNA, I could work like in healthcare.
mm. Well, it sounds like it's like instead of serving pizza, you're serving people. But you're still serving
Wiping
people, so
ass.
it's like Yeah. Yeah. So it's kind of the same thing. Like you stretch out pizza dough or something. So still
I
kind of
just,
doing it.
yeah. The pizza was better. The
Yeah.
recipe saving
Probably.
pizza.
Hmm. What the? How long did you do the nursing aid thing before you found what you were doing now? And is what you're doing now the thing that you love to do, or you're still exploring to find? Are you still like testing things out to find something that's even better, a better
No,
fit for you?
I love what I did. So I like to say like I'm 29, and so the decade of like 19 to 20, I'm tired from it. I did everything. So a lot of people ask you because it's not that it's still pretty young. So people love to ask like, "What are you going next?" I'm nowhere. I'm going home to the house that I pay for. I'm tired. I want to do things that are fun for me. I finally got a job that like pays enough that I want it to pay, and it's doing stuff that I like to do, and I don't want anything else out of it. I'm exactly where I want to be in that respect. But I was a CNA for a few years, and I was in nursing school, and I actually didn't know that I had pretty severe ADHD in nursing school, and I had a really hard time, and I dropped out like when I was close towards the end, and I thought I was a huge failure, and I just felt awful. And because up until that, I was like just a really high achiever. I just didn't know that that was the reason I couldn't get it. Like it wasn't sticking, and I was really smart. And my teachers were like, "You're so smart. Why don't you get this?" And I'm really have a really good bedside manner, and it seems like it would be second nature. And it wouldn't stick. I couldn't wrap my head around it, and so I thought I was a huge failure. And I just had some stuff go on um, when I was in nursing school, and I wanted to get out of town. And so I actually moved to Atlanta. I don't care if people know like roughly where I live or where I'm from. And I moved to Atlanta, and I got a job as a nurse tech because their whole like certification is a little bit different than where I'm from. And so their nurse techs worked in tandem with medical assistants, and I was able to take the test after I had a year of work experience, which is kind of hard to do because most places will not hire you unlicensed as a medical assistant. But because of like the transference of the CNA to the nurse tech and then over to medical assistant, and that's a I don't know if you know about like the differences between like nursing and medical assisting, but it's like it's not a full registered nurse, but it has a lot of parallel responsibilities to nursing. And so I worked as that for about 7 or 8 years. So I was only a CN, like a CNA in title for maybe 2 years or 1 year, and then I was a medical assistant after that for the rest of the time.
Did did learning that you had ADHD? So how did you learn that you had it? And then how did they? I think being surrounded by medical people probably would have made that an easier diagnosis. So like, I wonder how long they let you suffer before they're like, hey, maybe you have this.
Long time. So, well, I'm very like just in personality, I speak very authoritatively. And so I mask extremely well. So people think that if I'm not getting something, it's by choice. I'm
Hmm.
choosing not to understand it. And because I'm like so smart in other ways and like socially, I get along with people. So I just cover it very well. And so I actually got my bachelor's degree. It was so hard. Some of the classes were so hard. And towards the end of it, it just like stuff was catching up with me. And, but I got through it, didn't think that much of it. And then the job that I had, I was working in a pediatric office, and we would have like these vaccine schedules that are really complex and hard to get. And then we just had these kind of different processes that we were supposed to go through. And I was so smart. I was good with the patients, and I could like, I knew like my drugs, I knew all this stuff. And then I would mess up these like things I've done 1,000 times. Like I know the vaccine schedule like the back of my hand, and I would mess it up. And I would just feel like, what's wrong with me? Because I've done this 1,000 times. Why do I make a stupid mistake? Why do I make a stupid mistake? And my boss would do say the same thing. She'd be like, I don't know why you do everything perfectly, and then there's like a mess up. And I said, I went and I got evaluated, and I came back, and I worked there for like I think 4 years in total. And I got diagnosed like the very last year that I worked there. And one of my coworkers who I've been with the whole time said, "Oh, I knew you had that the whole time. I was wondering why you weren't medicated." I said, why did you not tell me?" She said, "Oh, I knew you had that." And so I just kind of like was hearing about it. And like when I was in high school, I would get in trouble for talking, but I got straight A's. So it just kind of flew under the radar. And my friends would joke about it, like, "Oh, you're so ADD, you're so ADD." I was like, "LOL, maybe." And so I finally just asked my doctor. No, I started my master's program and I couldn't sit down because like I had to do so much with so much more information. So like my bachelor's was hard, but it was like do a quiz, do this paper that's like not more than 8 pages, and you can just like break it down into little pieces, and it's like that's the whole. It was just like such smaller amounts of work to do that are really easy to kind of portion off. And I started my master's program, and they were like, "Okay, do 14 pages now of a concept that you're not completely familiar with yet. You know, read 200 to 300 pages, write a 14-page paper on it, and do it now." And I was like, "How do people? I can't do that. There's no way I can do that. I can't. I would sit down before I know it, I'm up. I'll sit down before I know it, I'm up." And I went to my doctor and I was like, "I don't know how to say this because I feel like a lot of people kind of come off like medication seeking." I was like, "I don't want medicine. I just want to know if this is what I'm dealing with." And I explained it to her and she sent me to get the evaluation. And that same day, he was like, "Oh, no, you have it and you should take something for it." And so for me, it was really, really easy. I know some people like takes them months to figure it out and go through all this stuff. So I don't know if it was so obvious to them or if I just got really lucky with people who are very understanding.
Hmm. Uh, there is like a problem in America as well where they're either ignoring you when you have a medical problem,
Mm-hmm.
or they're overprescribing because they're concerned that they don't want to miss it and then have you come
Mm-hmm.
back and be mad at them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, how clear cut is it in terms of understanding if someone has? I always think like, are they hot dog or not hot dog from like Silicon Valley when they're like trying
Mm-hmm.
to do like an app? It's like, is it a hot dog or
Mm-hmm.
not hot dog?
Mm-hmm.
How clear cut is it when someone has ADHD or not ADHD? Is it like it's down to a science, like we really do know? It's like
Mm-hmm.
not hard to mess up and like give you like the wrong thing
Mm-hmm.
or whatever, or is it kind of subjective?
It's both. Like
Mm,
people who, well, any like kind of neuroscience, science in general is not as cookie cutter as people want it to be, which it has to seem that way or no one will trust it. But the nature of it is the fact that everybody's different down to our DNA. So they're pretty sure when they look at people who have ADHD that they, have all of these things and they can look at the brain and determine when they look at the brain the differences in people who are like neurotypical versus people with ADHD. When they get into the thick of it, it's hard to know why you have it. Is it a nature versus nurture problem? Is it genetic? Or do you have ADHD or do you have something else that's mimicking? So
mm,
one thing that really overlaps is like depression, anxiety, and ADHD have very similar symptoms. And so sometimes when you go to the doctor and they give you that like depression questionnaire that they have to give you every year or whatever, people with ADHD will score really high on that, not because they're depressed, but because that's just the nature of their ADHD. So it'll say like, do you have a problem focusing? Because that's a symptom of depression. Absolutely, they have a problem focusing, and it'll say like, do you have little interest in some activities versus others? Absolutely, that's how ADHD works. Is you have a lot of interest in something, and then you lose interest because of the dopamine variation. And so I think that's why some people have trouble is because they want to be sure. They want to make sure you're not depressed first. They want to make sure. And so you have to go get, I know for me, they made me get like a full psychological evaluation where they talk you through kind of everything to make sure they're not missing something else with it. And I think otherwise it just depends on your prescriber or your provider. Because I know some of them are like the purse strings are tight on their Adderall and they're not going to give it to anybody. But my doctor had a really similar story to mine of how she found out she had it. So she was just very empathetic and nice and like, and was not, it wasn't hard to do it for me. But I know I'm really lucky because I know some people who are similar who have like just had a hard time getting that diagnosis and stuff.
yeah. The it. I think sometimes I think doctors mean well, but sometimes um their way of executing on the idea of meaning well
Oh
is not
yeah.
very good.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Like I've, I know I've been in like the medical field for so long. I have like good friends who are doctors and they're just great and excellent. But I also work with some who I'm like, I wouldn't trust you to put for a Tylenol.
Yeah.
Like there's, yeah, it's just like, it's, I think that we have like an esteem for the profession, and there's like a power dynamic inherently that goes with it too, because you're trusting them with your whole body. But it's literally like anything else. Like you could go to Starbucks and you could be like, every time I get that barista, they make my order wrong. That's not the good
Mhm.
one. She's not the one that makes it right. Same thing with anything else. Same thing with medicine. You might get a doctor who's honestly just passed the test. They may not be that good.
Yeah, I was recently getting my heart checked out with a cardiologist, and I just kept thinking this guy's a dipshit. This guy's a dipshit. This guy's a dipshit.
Uh-huh.
And he made me wait an hour. He was there for 20 minutes. I think he was like hitting on the nurses and not doing his
It
job. Uh
probably was.
I want them to send me sometimes they do like a survey so you can say like,
Hmm.
hey, this guy was a piece of shit.
Hmm.
He was just being like he was being arrogant
Uh-huh.
and like really flippant. I was like, dude, I drove an hour to get here. You were
Uh-huh.
late and you like were right down the road. Can you like stop and like
Hmm.
be useful? And the
Hmm.
come away was he was like, oh, do these tests. I was like, no, I don't. I no longer trust your judgment. Like I'm
Hmm.
gonna go find another doctor now because you
Hmm.
wasted my time.
Hmm.
Because you have to like if in your gut if you're talking to someone who's making your coffee wrong essentially, um, this is something that I think that it's really useful for younger people to know because for the most part, as a percentage, most people should be relatively healthy, so they don't really interact with doctors a lot,
Hmm.
so they don't
Right. Oh yeah.
know. You
Oh,
don't really
primarily.
know
Yeah.
how.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think I think we're about to be on the same page.
Oh
The
yeah.
the when you finally do get sick, the problem with being sick is you don't have the energy to suss this stuff out.
Yes.
Because
It's
you're
called,
and
yeah,
so yeah, there's a name for this.
self advocacy.
Okay, yes. Okay. But yeah,
Uh-huh.
self advocacy.
Yeah.
I think for people listening in, if you're younger on down, if you're talking to a doctor, you don't have to listen to their opinions. Do your research, and I'm not saying like be anti-science or anything at all, but doctors are a resource for you to get better. They're not the thing that's going to make you better. I think like that
Mm-hmm.
way of thinking about it's different. I've had a
Mm-hmm.
lot of friends who come to me because I've been in the ICU and ER a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and I tell them like if you see it that different shift, like they're a
Mm-hmm.
service to help you. That then you
Mm-hmm.
ask questions like, well, if there's a service I want to know is like my check engine light, like what does that mean? Blah blah blah. If you ask those questions, you can very quickly tell where a doctor is bullshitting you and where they're not, and that's really
Mm-hmm.
useful to know. If a doctor says, "Hey, I'm a generalist doctor. I researched this because of what you said, and this is where I think we're at. But I'm going to consult with a specialist to make sure we're in the same spot." Like that was gold, right? Like you know the
Mm-hmm.
person's doing a good job. But
Mm-hmm.
if you ask a question and they come off like really ignorant and they're not going to admit it, like do you really want someone who won't admit that they don't know one thing to like really help you with everything else?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I have
but
a
yeah, I
lot to
think
say about that, absolutely. Because number
I
one,
agree
not
with it.
only is my degree heavy in that topic, but also I had cancer when I was 22. And so I got like a crash course in navigating the healthcare system at that time. And you're 100% correct. And I feel like one of the hardest things is that you hear, like, oh, get a second opinion, stand up for yourself. But when you're in a room with
Hmm.
somebody who is experienced and they have this kind of authority over you, and you're in a vulnerable place, it is hard to have the balls to say, I'm not comfortable with that, or I don't want to do that. And on top of that, when you go to like the larger health clinics and stuff, it's like the 5 minutes you get with your provider is all you're going to get, because then you're going to call, it's going to go through the phone tree, or you're going to send a portal message and the different person, it's like going to, customer service on like Amazon. You're not going to get the same people and they're not going to understand the whole issue. And it's so difficult. And so I feel like you have to kind of find a provider that you trust. And if you don't trust them, your action might be to be kind, let it rest, and find a new practice. Or when you go to the checkout desk, you say, is there any way I can see somebody else next time? Because like you hear, oh, get a second opinion, but then you're like, how do I do that? Who do I
Hmm.
call? I pick up my phone. What number do I put in here? Like, what person do I tell that to? And it's really hard to actionably do those things in real life when you're
Yeah,
like faced with it.
yeah. Being sick is like having a part-time job.
Oh, full time.
Y-
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's like a part-time job once it's worked out and you know what it is. If
Uh-huh.
figuring it out, it's a
Exactly.
full-time job, and it'll eat
Exactly.
your day. It'll eat your day.
Exactly. It's awful. Like you're like, and another thing that it frustrates me, that I try to be really cognizant of this when I'm dealing with people, with patients and stuff, but the medical field doesn't understand that people have lives.
Hmm.
People have to ask off work. PTO they didn't have. PTO they wanted to spend somewhere else. And they'll say, well, can you come at 2? You all we have is an appointment at 2 because this doctor is only available in this office on those days. And I try so hard to be aware of that and be very flexible when I'm setting up appointments with people now because I get that 100%. And yeah, it's a full-time job. What can I do now? I had to leave work early and now it's 3 and I can't go back and I lost a whole day. So it is like a full-time, but it doesn't pay you. You pay it.
Yeah, I think the people who've been on the show where we've talked about medical issues, it seems like women when they're dealing with like OBGYNs, it's probably like the worst stuff I've heard so far in
Mm-hmm.
terms of like I have to take a day off and then I have to drive an hour to see someone and then maybe they help me or maybe they try and take my uterus and they don't even know what the problem is. And it's like, like I see my doctor, maybe he like gropes me. That's about it in terms of uncomfortableness. But like no one like threatens to remove organs of mine as
Mm-hmm.
like in terms of like the feedback I've gotten from people who've been
Mm-hmm.
on the show and listeners, which everyone out there who's shared, I'm glad that you feel comfortable sharing with me. But like I'm sure there's other terrible things in terms of just like idea of in America you only have like what 2 weeks of time off a year. You
Mm-hmm.
have like 3 sick days. Imagine being those
Mm-hmm.
train people. I was reading about the train folks who were doing a strike because they had like 1 sick day a year. How are you supposed to
Mm-hmm.
see a doctor to take care of yourself and make sure you can be healthy and do your job? It is asinine to me.
It
And
is
then you
asinine.
do all of that and you don't find the right doctor, like you're saying. You find the
Mm-hmm.
wrong doctor, and then you have to go through this whole process again. And so now you have a week in 4 days or 5 days or 3 days, and you're not even better yet. Not even at the point where you're like, you know what it is and you're maintaining it. So
Oh
anyone out
yeah.
there going through this stuff, it's like it's kind of like a sadness to it in terms of like you
Mm-hmm.
have to just accept like it's a journey. You hope that the person's going to take care of you. I don't know if there's any ways on the inside that you've seen to suss out who's a good one or not. I look at the reviews, but I think even the reviews are pretty curated when it's on their
Mm-hmm.
website and stuff.
Yeah.
Because I'm looking forward to having the review of the guy I saw. I want to tank that guy's review score because he had a 5. He had like a 5, and everyone was like, "Oh, great, 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 great." It's like okay, but like they probably pick and choose. So is there a way that you've noted in the wild or otherwise
Mm-hmm.
for people to know if they're going
Mm-hmm.
how to find the better doctor so they don't have to spend so much time? I
Mm-hmm.
think it might be just trial and error.
I think that there's 2 things you can do. I honestly, if just like point A to point B, in an ideal world, I would say, go in knowing this might be the throwaway time.
Hmm.
So going that first time with low expectation. I would say whoever, when you go in, whoever is gets you in the room, height, weight, medical history, that's still kind of a here or there. But if you can get a good repertoire with them and tell them honestly, who do you think I should be seeing? And offer them something of yourself. This is what I'm concerned about. Do you think that I'm seeing the right person? Most likely they'll be honest with you. They might, because some people might say like puppet to you, whatever.
Hmm.
But if you can think to yourself, what is the best way to say this so that I'm not shitting on the one that I'm seeing, but I'm offering them what I'm looking for, and just tell them like I'm looking for a doctor who is a good match in XYZ respect. So like you could say, I'm looking for a doctor who's with the ADHD example, you could say, I'm looking for a doctor who's really good with ADHD, who's really, really good in understanding with mental health. Do you think that this doctor that I'm seeing is the best option, or do you think there's someone else in this practice who is another, or even to say another option if things don't work out with this one, or as a backup? Because that person will know, oh, Dr. Johnson, or they'll say, no, you're with the right one, or they'll say, if it doesn't work out, or even afterwards, like when you're in checkout, you can say, I think the key to it is to do that like compliment sandwich thing. We're like, I enjoyed seeing this doctor. This question is still unanswered. Is there another provider here who maybe would have a different? Because a medical assistant or their nurse, they know.
Mhm.
They're the ones who know. The other doctors, they may not. And the patients, it depends. Because some doctors, like, we can't stand working with them, and then their patients love them. And that's what they say. Well, their patients love them. Well, their patients love them. And we're like, well, we hate them. We can't stand working with them. And so, but the nurses are going to know because they put you in the room and they already know probably what the doctor's going to say to you most of the time. If they've been there a while, they already know what the doctor's going to say to you, what the doctor's going to order for you. And so if you can find a way in your brain to ask them that question without coming across as if you're shitting on anyone in the practice, they're going to give you the information.
Yeah, I think that's really smart. I think the key there is the in the last like sentence you said as well. It's like the not shitting aspect.
Mm-hmm.
If you, I think even if you imply in like a nice way that you weren't satisfied, I think
Mm-hmm.
some people people don't like that confrontation. Like it's hard for them
Exactly.
sometimes. Personally, I'll confront you on anything, but I know there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people out there. You
Right.
confront them and they get like all twitchy, and it's like as long as
Mm-hmm.
personally, I think people should be able to just take confrontation as long as it's respectful. But I think like just to highlight one thing that I heard there in particular at the end that I think is really worth noting is like you know think out like what you're gonna say, and then just imagine saying that to someone that you really love. If you're gonna
Mm-hmm.
talk to them and like you're really frustrated, just imagine like you're probably gonna say it in a grumpy way, and then now
Mm-hmm.
they're less likely to help you out. I think this is
Mm-hmm.
what we're both agreeing
Mm-hmm.
on here. And so if you're in that moment, if you can take a pause, take a deep breath, and just picture someone you love that you're saying it to them,
Mm-hmm.
you'll say it in a
Mm-hmm.
good way, and they'll help you
Mm-hmm.
out. Or
Mm-hmm.
hopefully, or at the very least, point
Mm-hmm.
in a good direction.
And that's
But
why I
I do
meant
want
like
to
that's
circle.
why I thought. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
That's why I was thinking the low bar of like if you go
Mm,
in thinking this person's gonna solve and I know it's frustrating. I don't feel good. This person's my only lifeline. But if you go with a lower bar, then you're not mad. You're like, well,
mhm.
I thought this person may not be the fit. They weren't, and now I can do the next step, which was that line I practiced in the car on the way here. And I can deliver it without coming off like a nasty person, and then I can get a better solution to what I wanted.
Yeah. And then just talking about ADHD because I have heard about mental health. That's a big thing that I want to talk about on the show in
Mhm.
general. But we talked about it a little. Like I think you gave a good example, like what it was like for you to live it. But in retrospect, was there anything like if someone was listening in and is there anything that they would feel or experience that would let them know, like, hey, I probably should see a psychologist, like that would let them know,
Mhm.
like a medical person, not like
like
as
if you
advice, but like just like something to think about.
like if you were born after like 85. Probably need to see somebody for that. Um, I think if you feel this is gonna not as tactical as I usually like to give people advice, but if you feel inherently that you are bad at something, just bad at a lot of things, um, that you're not that you're like failing, but you're falling short in a lot of areas that you are genuinely trying at, and to be honest with yourself, be genuinely honest with yourself. Um, and and that feeling is probably not right because people who are coming from a place of like earnesty and honesty are not just failing. And that's what the one of the biggest things I've noticed is kind of like shifting and learning that I was struggling with some of these things was I wasn't failing at that. And so, but when you talk to people and you say like, and they ask you like, what is it like? And I'm like, well, I'll be honest with you, like I have yet to start and finish turning the washing machine on in the 1 minute time span because I distract myself from the time I'm pouring the detergent to when I was going to start the button. They think, oh, silly. And I probably did something like that. And they go, oh, I do that all the time. I do that all the time. So sometimes when you give like those little anecdotes of like, this was a symptom I had, people think, well, I had that. But when I say like overall, if you're noticing in your life, like I feel like a huge failure for these things, I can never hack it. Probably the reason you can't hack it is because there's something underlying. So I'm like, why can't I hack just existing? Why can't I hack like a getting to work routine, no matter how much I try? And you've downloaded planners and you've done all the things and you've checked all the boxes they say to check, and you're like, I'm still inherently a failure. Probably not. So if you sit with yourself and you feel something like that in there, it may not be ADHD, but there's probably something going on that is outside of your control mentally.
And then the are psychic valves like a fun thing? They take a long time to do.
That's a good question. I like again, I feel like I lucked out because when
Hmm.
I got like my doctor referred me and the guy called me and I it was like literally one of those like don't go by first impressions because he left a message on my voicemail and he was like, hey, I don't give drugs out. And I was like, I don't want to go to this guy because I already told my doctor I didn't want drugs. I actually just wanted to know, do I have it so I could get some coping, like some accurate strategies. And but he was who she referred me to, so I went to him, and he's been my therapist now for like 3 years. Um, and my evaluation with him was fine. He's like 84, and he's the nicest man I've ever met. And he's extremely progressive because Asheville is a very, very liberal, progressive area. And so he's like really nice. Now my husband sees him too. He's like our family therapist, and he's wonderful. And my psych eval with him was an hour long, and he just talked to me and sent a little letter and said, "Yeah, you do have it. Do you want to keep coming back because you cried?" And maybe you should talk about that. And I said, sure. And so that was like it was for me. Now my sister, she had to go for an evaluation for something else because like now they just kind of toss you through the wash, so to speak, if you need something addressed. Her situation and her experience was terrible. She felt the person didn't listen. She felt like she was cut off. She felt like they didn't do everything accurately. And so I really think it's another one of those like that's really just some shit you have to eat because we have a shortage of mental health providers in the country. We have a shortage of insurances that they will take. So even if you find a good one, you probably can't afford it. And so I had a great time. I know people have had a terrible time. Like I said, for me, it was like fine. He like helped me so much and he was so nice about it. Even though that first phone call was weird. I think what he was meaning to say to me was that he wasn't a psychiatrist, he's a psychologist. So he
Hmm.
doesn't prescribe medications because he's not a doctor. Um, or he has a doctorate, but he's not a medical doctor. But what it came off was, I'm not going to give you drugs. So he turned out to be the nicest person. So that's tough. I really hate when somebody's like telling me they're going to have to go through that. I'm like, that's just part of the human experience we're going to have to go through, and know that afterwards you might need to recover.
Yeah. And is there I imagine there's probably an online portal, but I think people probably there isn't like something that you did self education on. There's like a resource online to help with anything on that, or is it just like kind of like you just seem like a person that would probably like to research more things about these things. So when you were going through it, was there a resource that helped you, or is it really
There
just like
is
seeing these people? Yeah.
so it's called Attitude Magazine. It's spelled ADD, Etude, and they have a ton of really good articles, and they also have a lot that are geared toward adults with ADHD because that's another thing that's tough is that everything is geared towards children. And so you'll look up like tips for ADHD and it'll be like, talk to your teacher, they'll help you. And I'm like, I don't have a teacher. I'm just out here doing this alone. And so they have a lot of like really good tips. One of the most helpful things I think I ever read was like to have a launch pad. So like when you go to sleep at night, you put everything you need for the next day on your launch pad. And it's just like a place on your table or like a chair next to the door. And so that's what I wanted. I wanted stuff like that that was like, buy the red folders. That's going to help your brain. Do the meal planning like this. That's going to help your brain. And attitude, I think they have a lot of like actionable things that help.
Oh, sweet. I don't know if I have ADHD or anything like that, but I'm definitely gonna check out their magazine regardless. Just as one person because that sounds really cool. All
It
like
was so helpful.
it's hard to find actual. There's just so much on the internet, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
so if someone like a watering hole with actual insight, like you'd be surprised how often you can apply that to other things. All right,
Mm-hmm.
so
Oh
then
yeah.
working. So you have this going on now. You're probably beasting it at work, and then it probably made it easier for you to figure out where you want to go and navigate career wise because then you're not like when you're competent in something like, oh, I can do that more, right?
Yeah.
Versus like,
Yeah.
oh, I just suck at this. Like people
Yes.
usually, if I suck at something, don't want to progress in it. So
Mhm.
then I imagine after this it's where you settled in working in research. So then that's my guess, but correct me if I'm wrong. And then what was that transition like?
It's similar kind of. I definitely didn't know that I could go towards that goal without this. So I just kind of like was told like you're really careless and things like that need a lot of specificity and you have to be really careful and everything's going to be messed up if you mess it up. And so I was definitely afraid to do that kind of thing or to like to want to achieve that kind of thing because I thought I couldn't sustain it. And so let me think. I finished when I was finishing my degree, someone reached out actually for looking for a job as a research coordinator. And it's something I had done a little bit of when I was in Georgia. Like I worked around it, but I wasn't ever like in the actual research role. I was doing like supportive stuff. And so this recruiter reached out and was like, "Have you thought about research?" And I was like, "Actually, yeah, I think it's really, really cool. I would love to do that." And I was actually afraid to respond to her at first. And so I didn't for like 2 weeks. And then by the time I got in touch with her, they'd already filled the role. But she said she'd like keep me in mind. And I kept in touch with her for a few months. And once I realized like this, I kind of looked into it and I was like, this is what I want to do. So I was getting paid really poorly when it was what I was doing. And so I was like, this is going to pay me more. I want that. And it's going to be cool. And it's going to be like learning all this stuff. And there's like, it just checked all my boxes. All of a sudden it was like, oh. And so I did definitely have the confidence to pursue it once I realized, like, oh, I'm not a failure. I'm not careless. I'm not terrible. It's not that I'm not trying hard enough. I am trying hard enough. I just have a little, need some extra help in some areas. And once I had that, I was like, I had the confidence to be able to think, no, I can probably do that. It's not going to just burst into flames after a little while. And so I just like aggressively applied to research jobs for like 3 months, 4 months. And then I got my foot in the door and it was doing research, doing cancer screening research. And that was really important to me because I had cancer, when I was in my earlier 20s. And so I was just really special to be able to working in that. And also special to be able to be working in that in my region because we're like, there's more like the place where I am is a city, but there's a lot of rural areas right around here. And so we don't get a lot of like research and the highest tech, and everybody has to go to like the bigger cities for that kind of thing. So I want to be a part of bringing it to us here. So I was like so happy to be able to be doing both of those things. But that was a contracted job. So I was still having to interview for everything and constantly looking for another one because it didn't have benefits, didn't have PTO, anything. And so I just kept applying. And I applied to the job that I have now. And I just feel so lucky because my boss is really cool. She's one of the nicest people I've ever worked with or worked for. And everybody in our little department is like similar passions, similar interests because it's a niche. Like working in research is a niche, clinical research is a niche. Like it just kind of narrows down, and then everybody in your little circle is like similar to you because that's the kind of people that gravitate towards that. And so now I work, and it's actually in a GI office, but I work in a lot of cancer screening studies still, and we do liver studies and Crohn's studies and all sorts of stuff.
It sounds fascinating. You mentioned a second ago that there's like kind of like archetypes in terms of people who can that seem to be around you.
Mm-hmm.
What are I guess like kind of like a two-part question?
Mm-hmm.
What skills do you think someone would really need to do that job well? And then are there personality types when you look around you that you're like, oh yeah, well that like they're like me or whatever. So
Mm-hmm.
I guess like the easy one is like if someone's listening and feels like, wow,
Mm-hmm.
Grace kind of sounds like me. Maybe this is like they'd be like easy
Mm-hmm.
transition for them. But so what are the skills and what are those like similar attributes I guess to like
Mm-hmm.
be to do well in this? I have your ADHD medicated is probably one of them.
I think one of the things I've noticed, like the people who do the best at this job and that can stick with it, are people who care about it and find it very, very interesting. That's like the biggest thing of like what I've noticed the people who do well, they care so much about it. I care so much about it. My coworkers care so much about it. Like we're excited to be part of like these like changes in medicine and be part of these research projects. It's amazing. It's so cool. And we all have that matching care and like passion about it. So I I think like anybody who's interested should give it a try. But I also think if it's not something that you 100% are sold on, then don't put the work in because it is a lot of work. And so I definitely would say like don't dip your toe in it if you're not sold because it's going to be a lot of work. You're going to have to learn a ton, even if you have like a degree in this related field. You're going to have to learn so much. And if it's not something that you were really excited about, it's going to suck. because that's just going to flush it down the toilet. So while you do have to try things, I would learn enough about it beforehand to know this is something I can get excited about, or this is something that is not sound super cool to me. As far as like similar personalities, weirdly, just like very creative and very kind people are the people
Mm.
that I've like gravitated towards. So you kind of picture in like research and science this kind of like academic personality of people. And the ones that I've run into have all been very social and very creative because that's what makes like the science run and that's what makes it work. And so there are like data scientists and there are people who are doing that and they're part of it. But if you're going to be part of like the face to face research and like with patients and like working with them and conducting the like hands on the ground research are social people, creative people, outgoing people,
Mm. And
which is
then,
not what I expected at all.
yeah, I think it makes sense in the sense that like you're working with people. So if like you're an
Mm-hmm.
introvert and like working with people makes you tired, that,
Mm-hmm.
that it seems like that would be a little bit more of a struggle.
Mm-hmm. Which I think you still can. Like if you're super
Mm.
passionate about it, it's easy to balance out. So if it is something that you had that much passion for and you thought, well, I'm introverted, you could definitely make it work for you. But I have noticed that people kind of more naturally gravitate it to it are people who are social and now can just kind of move in that flow in that way.
Yep. And then how long have you been in that role?
So I've been a coordinator for a year and a half.
Mm.
And then before, when I worked in Atlanta, I worked for 3 years, 2 or 3 years. And that was just like more supportive stuff. So they had studies going around us, and then we just kind of had to be aware of like certain ones and how certain ones worked and stuff. And so overall in research, it's probably been like 4 to 5 years, but in like a very specific research only role, it's been a year and a half.
Then is there like upward potential? Is it like senior research helper, coordinator? Is like where do you see yourself going? Because you know you're a young person, so you have
Mm-hmm.
I mean if you worked all up until you died, you'd have like another like 50 years probably. But so
God, I hope
where do you see your well, I think I think for women your average life expectancy is much better than for men. You get an
no.
extra decade. You get an extra decade, but hopefully you're not like working all the way up to the end. But yeah, so what? How do you see? Do you have any intuition on like the future for you?
I don't want to. I my goal personally, and this is why I try to like encourage people on this.
Mm.
Like millennials, I feel like we were just like indoctrinated with like the rise and grind gospel, you know? And I'm like, don't. All the other animals out here are allowed to lay in the sun, you know? Like I I'm so happy to be where I am. And this is probably the first time in my life I didn't want to go anywhere else. And my boss, I see her job and I don't want it because she has to deal with like contracts and she I feel like has like this pinnacle of people who don't know what they're talking about and she has to tell them, and I hate that. I think that would be a horrible job, so I don't want to be the research manager. And where we some places will have a ladder of like coordinator one, coordinator two, and it just has to do with like what certifications you have. I am taking a test in a few months to be certified, so you have to work for a certain amount of time and then you can test and be certified, and it gets you like a little bit more money and such. But for the most part, there's like it's just the role is what it is, and I'm
Mhm.
so happy with it, and I'm so like the breath that I can take not having to aggressively try to achieve the next thing. So at the time from when I started my bachelor's program to when I got my master's was like 5 years. Yeah, because I wasn't because my son is 5 and that was like his whole lifespan. And so I did it. I did the reaching and the rising and grinding and working multiple jobs and stuff and being able to just like take a breath and go to my sister's house and eat dinner on the weekends and just have that be the life that I'm living is so nice. And I just like want to like encourage people like that we live in a late stage capitalistic society. And so you might think that's a good thing or you might think it's a bad thing, but the reality of it is that the percentage of people that are going to be like that elite level of wealthy and successful, statistically, probably not you. And so if you can make a life for yourself that you're happy to go make pizza with your family or do, play video games or play board games or whatever, that's the space that I'm creating right now and I love it so much.
But definitely, I see your point. A lot of times you don't really notice how weird it is in America until you travel somewhere else. Now I haven't traveled, so I only get to suck this, I steal this knowledge from other people.
Yeah.
But the even how we walk in America is weird compared. Like if you go to
Mhm.
Peru or apparently you travel in Europe, Americans are just like little pistons running around. And
Mhm.
I had a friend who was in I think Ecuador or Peru, like one of those Southern American countries, and it took them literally 4 days to stop walking so fast and just sit there. And they have siestas and stuff, which is kind of nice too. I think
Mhm.
we Americans could use that.
Oh
I mean,
yeah,
we're
absolutely.
productive enough to have siestas, in my opinion.
Uh-huh.
I think unions need to push for those. That's probably the only way people are going to get siestas. Um,
Mhm.
but taking time for yourself. But I also think that from what you were saying, and this is definitely something we want to touch on,
Mhm.
this job pays you enough for you to do everything you want to do in life. You have a home,
Mhm.
you have a family.
Mhm.
I mean, honestly, what else is there to want?
Mhm.
Um, getting off the rat race sounds like kind of a nice thing because then
Mhm.
are you going to enjoy the next 50, 60 years, or are you going to be like, oh, it,
Mhm.
it sounds like you're going to enjoy them. But
Mhm.
so saving up and then doing the home thing, especially while millennials
Mhm. So
on
hard.
younger. Uh,
Mhm.
well, I like what Minnesota's doing. I was reading about this earlier today.
Mhm.
Minnesota's outlawed private equity groups from buying up single family homes. It's
Really? Oh,
why
chills.
should a
Chills.
bank? Oh yeah. I'm like, oh, Minnesota,
Amazing.
we need to steal because
Amazing.
I'm fine with if you wanted to get a couple more properties and rent them out, right? That makes sense. That's fine. But to
Mhm.
have $1 trillion corporation come in and buy up a
Mhm.
whole area for two times the price of it, and then no one buys it to make I think one of them said, you won't own anything, you'll like it. Well, I mean that's the antithesis of America. We're all about drawing a line in the sand and saying this is mine and don't cross it. But
Mhm.
so what what was it that home buying journey like? Was there any stressors there in particular? Was it I don't know, was it particularly easy? If anything, maybe it went well for you, like the other things that you mentioned. But so what was the home buying thing like? And if you definitely check out Minnesota and what they're doing, other people can buy, other people still buy it, but single family homes, that's the bedrock of America. So for you, what was that like?
It was hard. It was
Hmm.
stressful. I cried a lot. And so just be ready for that. The first of all. And so I bought my home mid pandemic. Like literally I put my offer in Valentine's Day of 2020. And it was so stressful. I bought a condo. So I own it, but it's there's a caveat to that that home ownership. And I'm still very proud of it. But turns out that the mortgage company that I went with, they didn't check. They underwrote the whole loan without checking to see if it was FHA approved as a condo townhouse situation. And so I got to 3 days before closing and they hiked up my interest rate, hiked up my payment, and said, this is what we're going to do or nothing because they had to change it from a FHA loan to a conventional. Uh, so that was so stressful. The people that I was buying the home from, they were already kind of not happy to be selling it to me because I was paying them less than they wanted to get for it. And so that whole offer process was, totally separate from the getting of the loan for the home. And so I thought I wasn't going to get it. And I've been waiting so long and I'd worked really hard, saved up all this money. And I'm terrible. That's another thing about ADHD. It's so hard to save money. I'm terrible at saving money. So I've never been able to save this much at once or since then. And then I had all my stuff packed up in boxes and they said, well, we're not going to give you the loan we promised we were going to give you. So I had to switch lenders and I ended up, my realtor was amazing. I think that's one thing. Get a good realtor. And realtors will try to sucker you in and tell you oh, sign this little contract with me so that I can help you find a home and then get a good realtor and then if they're not working, ditch them. Don't that's where you got to be cutthroat because the one that I had, she protected me so well. And she had an excellent list of vendors that she worked with. And she said, this call this man. He will get you your loan. And I called him and he did. And I think he closed in like 20 something days, which was unreal. And he got me what's called a earned mortgage interest credit. And he did some magic, but it's a really interesting thing that not a lot of lenders know about, where they use like your the deductions you're going to use or a credit that you're going to use when you file your taxes to increase your income throughout the year. Then it qualifies you for the loan. So he did that for me. He did it in like 20 something days and he closed it for me. But the first people were terrible. They took like the full 2 to 3 months to close and then they didn't even close it. And so he closed it for me. I thought like while I was signing the loan, I was like, they're gonna call me and tell me that they changed their mind. And so when they called me and they said, no, the money's transferred, you own the home, it was like, okay, we can move now. But it was a very difficult process. It was very stressful, start to finish. When it happened, I thought I'll never do this again. Like I'm gonna die in this condo because I don't want to ever have to buy another home. It just the realism. And I think a lot of times you see like social media, because that's just how we see people's lives now. To say I don't think social media is the devil or anything. It's just how we see people's lives now. Anytime someone buys a house, they don't say to you, like, I cried 4 times this month about this. They're just like, got the keys. They're not like I had to start therapy because of this process. And so I'm like so happy to tell people like realistically, this is what it's gonna look like. Realistically, this is what might happen. And so that was like the actual process of it was very stressful. And I'm so happy and proud of myself because it was, an accomplishment, but it was extremely hard.
So how did you get them? Was it because of COVID that they were more amenable to a lower than asking price, or did you have any negotiation strategies there?
So this is, yes, it was kind of a perfect storm in my favor in terms of getting them to accept the loan. And then once the first one fell through, because I promised them a quick closing, and then the first one fell through. They were kind of still under contract, so it was like, well, is it worth it to come out of the contract at this point? And they didn't think it was, so glad they extended it. But originally, I had seen this home on Zillow when everybody's like scrolling, through houses that you're never going to buy. And I thought, I think I could afford that house, that place. And like housing prices in our area too are just unreal. They're like Los Angeles level prices, and to be like in North Carolina. So I saw it and I thought it's not exactly the right time for me. I don't have like the money saved. I couldn't like buy this today, but I just like saved it for later. And it went under contract, came off, went back on. Went under contract, came off the market, went back on. When it came back on, I had my realtor and I said, let me see this house. Let me see this house. And it was a little bit out of my price range, but I was like, I want to go look at it because it's the area that I've always wanted to live in our region. And we came to see it. And of course, in my head, I'm planning where all my furniture is going to go and like making plans to live here and everything, even though it was like, I want to say it was like $15,000 out of my price range. So it was on the edge, but like they're only going to give you as much money as they're going to give you. And so I made the offer and they rejected it. And I wrote a letter with it. And I'm horrible at writing, but I tried to be really honest. I said, this is who I am and this is what my family's like. And I lived here my whole life and I want to live in this house. And like a lot of places are just, investors are snatching up, and especially like being such a touristy area, it's like an unreal rate that investors are snatching up all these houses. And I just said, I want to live there. I want to own a piece of where I live. I've always loved it here. My heart is here. And they said no the first time. And then, like, maybe 3 weeks later, my realtor was like, hey, call me real quick. And I called her and she said they changed their mind. They said they were going to sell it to you at the price that you said you could afford. And I was like, again, this was like literally 2 weeks before the world shut down, which made things harder. And so I do think 100% that a good strategy is to write a letter with your offer and be very honest. Don't try to fluff it up. Like, do not try to fluff it up. I'm from here. I can't afford anything else. This is what I can offer you. This is what my family's like. Like, and this is why I want your house. This is why I like it. I think that's a very realistic strategy that you can try if you are looking to make an offer on a home. And then like if they say no, they told me no. And I thought, okay, it's not for me. And then they came back and they said, yeah, we're gonna sell it to you. And so like that those are two things right there that you can kind of realistically have in your head if you're looking to that process. Is like that might give you an edge because there are a lot of people who would rather sell their home to a person rather than an investor. You know, especially if it's a place they've lived before, they don't want to see it to go to the next person who's going to knock it down or rent it out or something.
Yeah, we had in agriculture, we have a thing where if you live on a farm and you're trying to sell your land, if a developer comes by and says, "Hey, I'm going to offer you like much more than maybe you would to buy the farm, but you're going to keep the farm going."
Mhm.
For if they sell the farm to you at that basically less than what they're going to get from the developer, the government
Mhm.
pays me as the seller, the
Mhm.
person with the land who's selling it,
Mhm.
the difference. And the reason for that is so that we don't have farmland being disappeared for development.
That's
Um,
amazing.
yeah, yeah, and yeah, America does like pretty well with agriculture. I actually was just recently talking to a
Mhm.
lady Connie, which maybe would be up by this point, but when this episode goes up, but
Mhm.
um, I wonder to what extent like is there a way to like counteract these BlackRock trillionaire groups from just
Mhm.
pricing people out like you and me from a
Mhm.
reasonable deal. And it's not like you looking for a lot. You just want to have a roof over your head and take care of your family.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I'm glad to hear that they that either the letter worked or maybe they got like they're like, oh, COVID, maybe we don't
Maybe
have the
they're
money
just
on
beaten
hand. It'd be
down. I
nice.
don't care. I was
Yeah,
like, I
yeah.
don't know what beat you down, but I'm glad it did.
Well, they
They
never they never told you what changed their mind.
they didn't. And when I saw them at closing, like I didn't interact with them because of COVID. You know, it was like only one person can go in and sign the papers or whatever. They did not look happy to see me at all because I'm like, hello. And they were like
Oh wow.
side-eyed me. And I was like, you know what? I don't care. I have a place to live. So have a good day. And I
Hmm.
don't know. They said, I think one of the reasons was because the contract had fallen through those several times. And at this point, and the people they had originally tried to sell it to, both two or three, however many people, had been investors.
Yeah.
So they were trying to flip it. They had rented it out, they hadn't lived here. And they were trying to flip it to the next person to invest it. And both of those investors were flippant about it. They were like, oh, I guess I couldn't afford it. Or I guess my finances weren't what they thought they were. You know, go on your way. It didn't matter to them. And I was going to close. I was going to live here. So I think that was one of the reasons they kind of took it because it was a sure thing. I was definitely going to live here and definitely going to go through with the sale.
I wonder if there's like a setting or something you can do on Zillow, or definitely a question to ask.
Mm-hmm.
How many times has someone made an offer on this place and it fallen through? And that
Mm-hmm.
should tell you like, you know, uh, maybe they're a little bit more amenable to a better
Well,
deal.
you can look
Mm.
sometimes, like if you scroll down, you can see like under contract, back on record, under contract, but you have to search. You can't just like filter it that way. You have to look and scroll,
Yeah.
and it'll tell you like how many times, and it'll tell you how much it went under contract for too. And I'm like, I look out for that.
Yeah, there was a place I think like 100 miles from me because sometimes it's just fun to see what people do
Oh
with their
yeah,
properties,
yeah, oh yeah.
and they were like I felt like there was an ask. It was like a $400,000 ask for this like dinky of a thing, and then I saw it like a couple months later, and they dropped the price by 100,000. I was like, yeah,
Hmm.
that's what you should do. Like
Oh, whenever I
and
see that,
even then they didn't get it. It's still sitting there. I think
yeah,
it's funny.
it makes me mad because I was looking the other day, and like someone had dropped the price like 50 grand, and I was so mad because I was like, that means you were trying to get 50 grand more than like what you could sell it for, than what you can get for it. You were just trying to what? Oh, it infuriates me. And I say all the time, like, I don't even believe like the amount of inflation that's happened, it's not real. Because like technically my house has appreciated $100,000 in 3 years. That's not real. Nothing gains $100,000 in value in 3 years. It's not made of gold. That's
Yeah,
not.
expand memories, which were gold in a different way, but you
Yeah,
can't,
it's important to me, but I'm like, I'm not dumb. This isn't suddenly 100,000. If anything, it's less because I've gotten life out of it and have used it. So if anything, it's less valuable than when I bought it. I mean, but no, not to anyone who might buy my house in the future. It's very valuable.
But that's a different house. This is the house you're living in now is a different house.
It's
You know,
different,
they don't
yeah.
know it's the same one. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
And
I'm
then
definitely improving it as we speak.
yes, and then the one big thing that you do in conjunction with everything we just talked
Mhm.
about is you have the podcast that we mentioned in the beginning.
Mhm.
Tell us like where that came about
Mhm.
and why you do it. I actually rather enjoyed it, so
I'm so
hopefully other
glad.
people will check it out as well. Yeah.
I'm so glad. So I just like born of a lot of things. But mainly I love podcasts and I've loved podcasts for so long. Like it's a part of my personality is that I just love podcasts. Just as a way to ingest information, audiobooks, podcasts, and part of that being ADHD, that you can do things and have it in your ears and it helps you
Mm,
focus, but then also you're learning things. I just love it. And so I always thought it would be cool to have a podcast, but I was like, I don't know. I don't know what it would be about. I don't know what I have to say. I don't want to just have like another bantering session because people are much funnier than us. So, or than me and my sister, like, we're medium funny. So, like, what's that going to be? And then, so I had that kind of arena. And then I have this part of myself that I love to read, very niche. I love to read like Wikipedia summaries of movies. Like, maybe I
mm,
wasn't going to get around to watch. It's so satisfying. It's like three to 5 minutes of reading and you know the plot. It's like my husband will be like, "Are you looking up the plot? Don't do that. It ruins the movie." And I'm like, "No, I just have to read it. I have to read what's going to happen." So there's that piece of it that I just like love a good summary of, and then maybe I don't want to watch it, or maybe I do, but I know what happens. I know what people are talking about too when they like talking about, oh, that movie. I'm like, well, I've read the Wikipedia summary, so I know it pretty well. And then like the third piece of it was that I noticed that I had gotten back into reading um after not doing it for a while. And that I would make my sister like I'll come home and I'll take my dog out and she watches my son, so she's here when I get home every day. And I'm like, hey, come out here and walk with me. And she'll be like, what? And I'll be like, guess what I just read. And then I'll be like rehashing the plot to her. And I'm like, oh, can you believe this part happened? And then this thing. And then I thought, wait a second, what if I just married all of these things? I make her listen to me talk about the book that I'm reading. I summarize it in the ways that I like things to be summarized, and it's a podcast. And I just like marry them all together. And most of the time I would say, and this happened, and she'd go, oh gosh, or I'll make her read the book with me, and then she hates it because I made her read it, and it was a book that she hated, and so it just kind of like solved all of the problems. That I'll summarize the book in enough detail that you could read it or you don't have to, and then she'll scream at me about the stuff that she hated because she was going to do that anyway. And also, we get to have a podcast, which is something I just love to do and to
mhm.
have. And I just
And then
married all the concepts.
yeah, what's the website? I honestly I forgot what the website. I think it's I can't guess it. What's the website for people to look it up?
You're fine. So we have a link tree, but the best way to find us is you can go on TikTok. It's at Screecher Pod is the name. And also on Instagram, Screecher Pod is the name. And either of those places will have like clips of little tidbits
Hmm.
that we've had. And then you can also click the link to find different places that you can listen to it. We also have a middle met episodes that we do every week where we're just like telling each other weird stuff that we found out this week, like weird stuff that we came across. And those episodes are much more popular than I thought they would be. Because again, I thought we were like medium funny, but I thought those weren't going to be popular at all. But some of them are more popular than our plot summary episodes. And
Hmm.
so we have a lot of little videos of those on our TikTok and our Instagram.
Sweet. And I know we're coming to the end, so I just want to thank you again for coming on the show today. Sharing your experience. I mean, talking about mental health, just in that alone, is something that most people don't do. And so
Mhm.
sharing that you went from feeling, kind of crummy about yourself to now having a fulfilling job,
Mhm.
a house that you negotiated and got a great deal on, which is kind of
Mhm.
nice too. You didn't get
Mhm.
taken advantage of. But I want to thank you for coming on the show today.
Well, thank you for having me. It was so good to talk to you.